Hasan Ayer was not the kind of man you noticed at first, which, as his mother once noted with the air of someone who had lost several spectacles in the laundry, was probably for the best. He was born on a Tuesday, the same day the bakery exploded, in a small Turkish town whose name no one can pronounce without sneezing. His father was a locksmith, or at least that's what he told the neighbors, though most suspected he just liked owning tiny tools. Hasan's first scientific breakthrough came at the age of 6 when he discovered that a magnifying glass, when left under the summer sun on a newspaper, could produce both combustion and a rapid visit from the fire department. This was, of course, quite impressive for a child who had only just learned to tie his shoes, the left one still giving him trouble into adulthood. But Hasan wasn't what you'd call a traditional genius. He had a PhD from the University of Vienna, yes, but he had acquired it in a way that involved several misplaced thesis drafts, one accidental Nobel nomination, a clerical error, and a bottle of Austrian apple schnapps. His most famous scientific theory, thermal reluctance in quantum spaghetti, was never entirely understood, not even by him. It had something to do with particles refusing to behave unless politely asked, which he believed was a fundamental oversight in physics. "We keep shouting at electrons," he once told a stunned room full of physicists in Geneva, "when perhaps all they need is kindness and perhaps a biscuit." He wore his lab coat backward, on purpose, he insisted, claiming it made his thoughts flow toward his spine. And he once presented a paper entirely in Morse code to protest linguistic bias in academia. No one could prove if he was right, but he had such kind eyes and a stubborn refusal to correct his mistakes that people just assumed he was onto something. Hasan's career took a sharp turn one spring when he attempted to develop a weather modification device using pigeons, copper wiring, and the inherent unpredictability of Mother Nature. The resulting contraption not only disrupted local meteorology for 3 weeks, but also caused the town to experience fog in the mayor's office and a small thunderstorm in a public restroom. The birds, however, were very pleased. After that, he was asked to relocate his experiments, preferably out of doors, and away from livestock. He moved to a quieter village, took up residence in a creaky wooden house that always smelled faintly of burnt toast, and dedicated his life to 2 things: understanding the universe and never being on time for anything, ever. In his later years, Hasan built something he called the harmonizer. It was 6 feet tall, entirely made of spoons, and emitted a low humming sound that made cats faint. He claimed it could detect lies through vibrational shifts in air molecules. Whether or not it worked was never determined, but local politicians stopped visiting him after one awkward demonstration. What mattered, at least to Hasan, was not that his inventions functioned, but that they existed. "Too many people build bridges only when there's a river," he once muttered to a curious goat. "I build them just in case." He had a habit of talking to animals. Most of them listened. Though married once, briefly and apparently by accident, Hasan lived most of his life with his books, his beakers, and a cat named Newton who was afraid of apples. His brief affair with a Romanian mathematician named Lydia ended when she attempted to organize his notebooks, and he accused her, quite emotionally, of trying to erase history. Still, he wrote her letters for years afterward, all unsigned, all in equations. Some believe she understood. Most believe she didn't. By the time he was 70, Hasan Ayer had published 57 scientific papers, 2 cookbooks, both banned in Sweden, and a book of poetry titled "Atoms Don't Care If You Cry." He refused to own a cell phone, believing that radiation from texting altered dream patterns, and once installed a weather vane indoors because wind is a concept, not a location. Students adored him, scientists respected him with some exceptions, and governments mostly ignored him, though one Swedish intelligence file described him as potentially dangerous with access to balloons. Hasan passed away at 84, seated in his garden with his hat over his eyes and a telescope aimed at the ground. "I'm checking if Earth ever looks up," he had told a neighbor the night before. At his funeral, which was delayed by 3 separate miscommunications involving a goat, a map, and a misprinted obituary, several of his former students read aloud from his unpublished final paper, "The impossibility of complete understanding and why that's a very good thing." He left behind no heirs, no fortune, and no instructions for what to do with the spoons. But he left something else. Curiosity, that glimmer of wonder, the delight in asking why, even if you don't get an answer. Because that, more than anything, is what Hasan Ayer believed in, the quiet, bumbling brilliance of trying to know, even if the knowing escapes you in the end. And so ends the slightly miscalculated, occasionally explosive but forever fascinating life of Hasan Ayer, scientist, oddball, and the only man to ever file a patent for ambient confusion.